Dutch van der Linde. The first time you hear this name, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? A charismatic leader? A traitor? Or maybe a manipulator? Whatever you think about this character, it doesn't change the fact that Dutch was actually a pretty good leader. He successfully built and led the Van der Linde gang, a group full of people with incredible potential. Dutch was someone his gang admired deeply. He didn't lead with fear or force people to follow him. His gang members stuck with him because they loved him, not because they were scared of him. That's why Dutch managed to build such strong loyalty among his people. They all knew one thing: Dutch was different.
Sure, I could fall in with another gang, but Dutch... You know, Dutch is different. Oh yes, Dutch is certainly different. He treats me fair. Most of you do. And for a fellow with a black father and an Indian mother, that ain't normally the case.
Now, if you finished Red Dead Redemption 2, chances are you think Dutch was not fit to be a leader and that Hosea was the true leader of the gang. But honestly, I think that's completely wrong. In my opinion, Hosea would never have been able to lead a gang like Van der Linde. Why? Because Hosea was too much of a realist, too wise, and not as bold as Dutch when it came to taking risks. If Hosea had been in charge, there wouldn't have been any big bank heists or train robberies. That's just not his style. He preferred cunning tricks to gain an advantage, always avoiding fights and violence whenever possible. And let's be real, that's not exactly ideal for a criminal gang, especially in the brutal Wild West. To survive as an outlaw in Red Dead Redemption, you have to be ready to use violence when necessary. If you're too soft and unwilling to take risks, your gang will just end up broke and forgotten. And on top of that, Hosea was too realistic. He never gave his people the kind of big dreams that Dutch did. Dutch inspired his gang. He gave them hope, a vision, something to believe in. And that's exactly what made him such a strong leader. People could count on him. Being too realistic isn't always a good thing, especially for a leader. Giving your people something to dream about, like Dutch did, is a powerful way to keep them motivated. Hosea? He was meant to be an advisor. His personality fits that role perfectly. But a leader? No way. He wasn't as ruthless as Angelo Bronte, Colm O'Driscoll, or Dutch himself, people who actually fit the role of outlaw leaders in the Wild West. But after hearing all this, you might be wondering, if Dutch was such a great leader, why did he fail? Why did he destroy his own gang from the inside? Well, in my opinion, Dutch failed because he was born in the wrong era. He was too idealistic, too utopian. He dreamed of a world where his gang could live free outside the law. But let's be real, that was never going to happen. The world was changing, and Dutch refused to change with it. Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place during the transition from the Wild West to the Industrial Age, and Dutch's dream became more and more impossible because of it. If he had been around during Landon Ricketts' prime, maybe, he would have had a chance. But in his time, no way. Dutch's biggest flaw was that he refused to adapt. And that's exactly what led to his downfall. Just look at how he reacted when he first set foot in Saint Denis.
Okay, there she is. A real city. The future.
Big cities. They're...
Always repellent.
Exactly.
I'll find you in there.
From this cutscene, we can actually see Dutch's perspective on progress, or more specifically, the future of the industrial era. Dutch van der Linde, a man who's lived free and wild since childhood, saw the transition from the Wild West to the Industrial Age as a threat. To him, lawmen were nothing more than puppets of the rich, enforcing rules that stripped people of their freedom. Dutch believed that every individual had the right to live without restrictions. But the problem was, his definition of freedom was a little too extreme. In Red Dead Redemption 2, which takes place in 1899, not every region was fully under the grip of the law yet. Take New Austin, for example, a place where law enforcement was still weak and outlaws ran wild, doing whatever they pleased without consequences. That was Dutch's idea of freedom, And he wanted it to last forever. Why? Because that was the life he grew up with. He didn't want his way of living to be dictated by people he believed had no right to control anyone's freedom. In Dutch's mind, everyone had their own version of freedom. And as bad as the Van der Linde gang was, they still had a moral code. That's why Dutch justified his crimes as helping the weak, like a Wild West version of Robin Hood, robbing the rich to give to the poor. But let's be real. No matter the reason, it was still illegal. Dutch romanticized everything he did. No matter how bad his actions were, he always found a way to make himself look like a charismatic leader, a hero to the people who needed him. And because of that, he refused to accept that what he was doing was wrong. If anyone dared to question him, he'd push back. And we all know who questioned Dutch's way of life, don't we? That's right, Agent Milton, or more specifically, the Pinkertons. The Pinkertons played a major role in transforming the Wild West into a more structured, law-abiding era. In Red Dead Redemption 2, they were deeply connected to powerful figures like Leviticus Cornwall, a symbol of industrialization and corporate power. The ideology of the Van der Linde gang and the Pinkertons? Polar opposites. Dutch believed that society was being enslaved by capitalism and modern government. He saw the old world, the Wild West, as a place where people could live free, outside the law. His goal was to build his own community, independent of government control and industrial influence. Meanwhile, Agent Milton, working for the government and big business, believed that gangs like Van der Linde were remnants of the past, obstacles standing in the way of civilization's progress. To him, law, industry, and capitalism were the future. And outlaws like Dutch? They were just delaying the inevitable. Both men hated each other, but here's the ironic part. Neither of them really cared about morality. Milton? He probably knew what he was doing was just business. But Dutch? He was in complete denial. Dutch saw himself as the smartest, most visionary leader out there. But in reality, all he was doing was protecting his ego. He disguised his selfishness with words like freedom and rebellion, when in truth, he just couldn't stand the idea of losing control. And that's why he hated the Pinkertons, especially Agent Milton. Dutch despised people who tried to dictate how he and his gang should live because it hurt his ego. So what really caused Dutch Van der Linde's downfall? A lot of people might say, Micah. But honestly, that's not the full story. Micah wasn't the main reason Dutch failed. His ego and the changing times were. Micah just sped up the inevitable. Even if Micah never joined the gang and Hosea was still alive, Dutch still would have fallen apart. Because nobody can stop time from moving forward. And when you have an ego as big as Dutch's, that's a recipe for disaster. Micah was just smart enough to take advantage of it. Dutch hated criticism. Every time Arthur or Hosea tried to reason with him, he became even more stubborn. He refused to listen to anyone who disagreed with him. That's why he stuck with Micah. Because Micah fed his ego. He constantly praised Dutch, encouraged his aggressive decisions, and made him feel like he was always right. Now, why do you think Dutch betrayed Arthur in the end? Was it because Micah manipulated him? Or was he just losing his mind? Personally, I think it was his ego. Dutch felt like Arthur had stopped believing in him, stopped relying on him. And to make things worse, Arthur started making his own moves without Dutch's approval. Dutch saw that as a threat. If Arthur could walk away from the gang, what if the others followed? What if he lost his control over them? That's why Dutch kept saying,
I had a goddamn plan!
Even when it was obvious he had no idea what he was doing. It wasn't about the gang's survival anymore. It was about keeping them under his control. Almost every heist after Chapter 3? It wasn't for survival. It was for Dutch's ego. Think about it. If he really wanted to escape to Tahiti, why did he keep taking bigger risks? They made plenty of money throughout the game, but it was never enough. Dutch always said, one last job. But every time, there was another job. It's almost like he was trying to prove something. And if you still think he was just trying to save up more money, ask yourself this. Why did he go after Angelo Bronte just for revenge? Sure, Bronte tricked Dutch, but what real purpose did revenge serve? Nothing, except to satisfy Dutch's ego. Dutch was the one who said, revenge is a luxury we can't afford. Yet, he killed Bronte anyway, because Bronte insulted him. Dutch saw Bronte as someone beneath him, so when Bronte tricked him, Dutch had to prove he was stronger. At the end of the day, that's who Dutch van der Linde truly was. His biggest enemy wasn't Micah, it wasn't the Pinkertons, it wasn't even the law, it was himself.
Jesus. Part of your philosophy books cover feeding a fella. Good goddamn alligator, Dutch. The part that covers weakness. That part. I don't know. Well, I do. It ain't nice. I know it. But it is us or him. I figure it might as well be him.
In conclusion, Dutch van der Linde is a charismatic leader, an idealist, and ultimately, a man destroyed by his own ego. Dutch wasn't just any gang leader. He didn't rule through fear, nor was he a tyrant who kept his followers in line with violence. Instead, he was an inspirational figure, an incredible speaker who could make people believe in his vision. His charisma was undeniable. He could get people to follow him based on his grand promises of freedom, a better life, and a world where they could live without being shackled by laws or a system he saw as corrupt. But beneath all that, Dutch was also an idealist who believed too much in his own dreams. He wasn't just a leader, he was a dreamer. Dutch wanted absolute freedom, a world without rules, without modernization, or the capitalism he despised. In his mind, he wasn't a criminal. He was a revolutionary, someone fighting against an unjust system in his own way. But the problem is, the world doesn't work that way. Dutch never truly adapted to the reality that the Wild West era was fading, and that law and civilization were getting stronger. One of Dutch's biggest flaws was his inability to take criticism. He always believed he was right, that his plans would work as long as everyone stayed loyal and followed his lead. He refused to admit his mistakes, always blaming others whenever things went wrong. In his mind, failure wasn't because of his own flaws. It was because someone betrayed him, because people didn't believe in him enough. This mindset made him more paranoid and stubborn, especially after losing the one person who kept him grounded, Hosea Matthews. Hosea was the only one who could talk to Dutch rationally, someone who balanced out his idealism with realism. But when Hosea died, there was no one left to hold him back. Dutch started to lose control, and that's when his ego completely took over. He became obsessed with proving that he was still in charge, still capable of leading, even as his gang was falling apart. And that's exactly where Micah Bell comes in. Micah wasn't like Hosea or Arthur Morgan. He never challenged Dutch when he was wrong. Instead, Micah was a manipulator, someone who knew exactly how to feed Dutch's ego. He never questioned Dutch's decisions. He praised them. He kept pushing Dutch to be more aggressive, fueling his paranoia and making him even more reckless. Micah didn't cause Dutch's downfall, but he definitely took advantage of it. Dutch was already heading toward destruction, and Micah simply sped up the process. In the end, Dutch van der Linde is a perfect example of how a charismatic leader with big dreams can be undone by his own ego. He refused to accept change, refused to acknowledge that the world was moving forward without him. He clung to a dream that was no longer possible, and when everything started falling apart, he chose to blame everyone else rather than admit that he was the cause of his own downfall. Dutch wasn't evil in the traditional sense. He didn't commit crimes purely for personal gain. He truly believed that what he was doing was for the good of his gang. But conviction without balance, without any connection to reality, can be dangerous. And for Dutch, that conviction was the very thing that led to his ruin. And that's my take on Dutch van der Linde, an incredibly charismatic leader, romanticized by his gang, but ultimately undone by himself. If you disagree with me, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments. Make the comment section a discussion forum where we can share different perspectives on this character. Alright, that's it for this video, but before we wrap things up, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to support the channel. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.